Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Thanks very much, Doctor, for your presentation. You covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. A couple of questions, or one of the questions, and give everybody enough chance to ask because we're kind of tight here, but do you think that, you mentioned trust, and it's been brought up before, and it's one of the reasons why people feel like they're disengaged in the process. But do you find, or do you see that if the provincial government is not seeming like they're listening at the provincial level, in as much as that they're changing, policies, regulations, now legislation, and taking powers away from municipal governments, do you think that local citizens will start feeling more disenfranchised with the system as a whole when, there's things that are set up, whether it's bylaws and land use and official community plans, can basically get thrown out the window, and then there could be negative impacts to those taxpayers because of those changes without, actually any consultation with those people. Do you think that that's gonna also push us to that point of looking for, alternative ways of governing when people don't trust what's actually going on at a provincial level?
No, thank you very much for the question. As municipalities, we're ultimately children of the province. And I think there's definitely a strong role for the province to play in guiding municipalities. We're talking particularly about, say, housing and the SSMUH housing. One of the challenges that we face is sometimes we need a nudge from the province to move things through some of those impasses. The rich conversations we have at the municipal level have their own challenges, I think. And they're also influenced by the quality of the discourse, and the discourse permeates from higher levels of government. So I think ultimately, the more connected you can be with residents, it's very important. We do sometimes need the province to step in when we simply can't get past a particular barrier, or when short-term interests supersede long-term interests. But I think there's definitely a conversation to be had about what constitutes listening and how you best engage with the public. And it's one we're having right now. We have a town hall on September 9th where we're going to be engaging with the residents. And one of the things that residents will sometimes say is, you're listening to us, but you're not hearing us. And I always try to unpack that as this challenging balancing act as municipal government of, we have lots of conflicting perspectives, we have to balance those out. We listen to them, and then we ultimately have to do what's best in the best interest of the municipality, using that information as an input. So it's a complicated process, as I'm sure you've all kind of been part of experiencing. But yeah, there's that interplay between the province and municipalities, which is kind of a process that's constantly in flux. You're going to see a bunch of UBCM resolutions that I helped draft, hopefully in a few months, and that's all part of that process as well. I think I wrote 9 of them this time around, so watch your inboxes.
Look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. MLA Shaw.
Thank you so much for your presentation. You mentioned briefly about the erosion of trust and some of the possible reasons for it. And while I understand much of that, I'm wondering what your thoughts are in a PR system to have some of the type of rhetoric that you referred to, like, for example, opposing in a vitriolic way and hyper-partisanship being a barrier towards collaboration or compromise to reach, important decisions that affect people in our province. So I'm wondering if you think whether the culture of our province, where we are right now, and our current state is conducive to collaboration and could sort of withstand some of that sort of vitriolic behavior that actually does exist in our system currently.
Fantastic question. One thing I think is worth noting is at the municipal level, and this is kind of, again, translating my experience, the way that you talk about your colleagues on the doorstep and potential other candidates changes. Because the voter can vote for 8 people, I wouldn't want to say things negative about potential other candidates on the doorstep because I might be working with them in a few months, right? So on the doorstep, I have 7 colleagues at the table, 8, of course, if you include the mayor, and people wouldn't just ask me who I'd vote for, but they would also ask me like who I shouldn't vote for. And I always avoided answering that question because I knew that there's lots of people who I could be sharing, the next 4 years with. So I think that is kind of fundamental. With PR, what happens is the parties that take this to the process, you're always going to get a bit of people doing vitriol and fringe parties that aren't there to play nice with others and are there to get a specific issue out there. That's going to exist in any political system. But in PR, the parties that are serious about making change, is serious about collaborating with others, will tone down that rhetoric because they recognize that they have to meet with the person afterwards. It's literally like, the election happens and the next day you might be negotiating next steps for government. You need to treat the way that you engage those people differently during the election. Otherwise, that negotiation process is going to be very toxic. So I think people who are parties that are serious about governing in a respectful and a constructive way tone down their rhetoric in PR systems simply because they want to work with others and they know they're going to have to work with others. I hope that answers your question. But I think ultimately there's always going to be some extremes, and those will exist in any system. But in a PR system, those extremes are marginalized insofar as those people are clearly, they're making a mess at the kids' table while adults are trying to make constructive, collaborative decisions based on respect and good dialogue.
Just a follow-up, Chair, if I may. Thank you. Do you think that candidates, and you've been a candidate at the doors as well, do you think candidates would be met with less skepticism, whether they belong to a party or not, if people knew that they had more than one choice on a ballot?
Absolutely. I think often what we see in the political science world is people vote for the leader, then the party, then the local candidate. And that often means that they don't even know who their local candidate is. And we're all political folks, so we could probably name our MLAs, MPs, city councillors, maybe our school trustees, maybe not, depending on who you're asked. I think most folks, if you were given multiple options, would create a balanced approach, right? I think some of the parties in British Columbia have really solid positions on a specific narrow area of policy. Other ones have better policies in other areas. I can vote accordingly, and I think that's really a valuable thing. It also means that, let's say I'm really passionate. The Animal Party is the best example I can have, because I know some deputies in the Netherlands. The Animal Party. Okay, so someone really cares about animals. They're going to vote for the Animal Party, but the top person of the Animal Party might get one seat, but the next 30 people aren't in PR. But that person then knows that their second choice, for example, for another party, is also going to have representation in the legislature, so they can effectively rank their priorities. And then as political scientists, one of the things we struggle most with is voter intent. If someone doesn't vote, we have no idea why they didn't vote. Were they not home that day? Are they disenfranchised? Did they get lost on the way to the polls? And a single vote gives us one piece of information, but if they can rank their ballots or select multiple people, that allows us more information. So as decision makers, we can better understand the intent of voters and then better reflect those intents in our decisions that we make. So yeah, more information is always better, and it's always a challenge when we're trying to just determine what voters want from just a single piece of evidence and data, i.e. one vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. And MLA Botterill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. As I don't know if you were here, but earlier this afternoon we had a presenter who raised very passionate and articulate concerns about the rise of extremist parties in Europe under proportional representation systems. And you've made the point that our politics is shaped by the electoral system, and you've made a very clear argument in case that PR will generate collaboration. How, from your background as a political scientist, how would you respond to the concern that, well, that's great, but then we're going to invite the rise of extremist parties in this province?
Great question, thank you. And I think what we see, there are some outliers, of course, but the general trend in PR systems is parties working together and collaborating. There's other explanations sometimes for the rise of extremism. I think the term is cordon sanitaire. So one of the things that parties that are well-meaning and mature, thoughtful parties will simply agree not to work with the extremists. And of course, when that breaks down, we've seen that break down a little bit in Europe these days in a couple places. That's a choice that politicians make. I think it's a very bad choice. It's often short-term. It's often a short-term choice, but there's been a long-standing practice of simply not working with the extremists. It's kind of like that, if a Nazi shows up to a bar, it's a Nazi bar. And if your coalition is willing to let an extremist into your coalition, then that reflects poorly on you. And I think a lot of times parties don't do that. If we see that breaking down, there's maybe other explanations. But I think in more cases than not, in PR, you tend to have a more balanced system where extremists get less voice simply because you have a multiplicity of views. You also get less extremism because people aren't marginalized as much.
Thank you. MLA Claire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things you said, Doctor, was about how you like to set up teams and work collaboratively with teams for resolving issues. And I suppose these teams are really like a sort of mini temporary political parties in some respects, because they are coming together on a common issue and advocating for that issue or working to resolve the commonalities or differences between problems to achieve a result. Like maybe there's a need for a new sewer system, or there's a bridge that needs replacing or something like that. So you work together on that project, then you move, and you may be on different sides for other issues. That would be the case, I imagine. Okay, so when you're doing those building up of teams, would you include people who have extremist views sometimes?
Great question. So at the municipal level, I'm watching our time, but I'll take a few seconds here. At the municipal level, in Saanich, we often have sort of shifting coalitions based on what the issue is of the day. So we have a group of folks that are really focused on housing. When it shifts the environment, the composition might change. When it shifts to road safety, the composition might change. Each issue is richly discussed, and you don't have that kind of partisanship that happens. When it comes to those kinds of coalitions, that's a decision that you'd make on an individual basis, and it can be a risky decision. So we don't have anyone who's an extremist on our council. But if you are, I guess this is talking about the long-term implications of making a decision. So if you have a short-term decision and you think it's more important to pass that vote, and you're going to invite an extremist into your coalition, that's a decision you have to make, but it has long-term implications and consequences. And I think that's something that we would negotiate. And every single decision is then discussed and explored. And yeah, is there a situation, the hypotheticals are a bit complicated, but yeah, there's a situation where you have to make that decision about the short term versus the long term. And my thought is when you have a collaborative structure where people are working together, those long-term benefits are often prioritized. When you have a more hostile, combative system, people make short-term decisions because if you don't get the decision now, the next government's going to undo it. Whereas when you have these stable kind of governments created by PR, you don't get that kind of pendulum switch as well, which I think is beneficial.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, thanks for the great question. That's a 30-minute answer. I think we could get into that longer.
I grinned at the chair when I asked it.
Yeah. People have written theses on that.
Thank you so much, Teal, for sharing your afternoon with us and answering all of our questions.
Thank you all so much, and good luck with the process. I hope it's an enjoyable one. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a short recess until